They call me the Dragon Father now. Ambassadors bow when I walk past. Emperors from distant star systems send me gifts I do not need, and letters I barely understand. 17 species have built statues of my face in their capital cities, and I still do not own a decent pair of boots. Funny how the universe works. Let me tell you how a man with absolutely nothing became the most protected soul in the galaxy. My name is Marcus Bellamy. Most people just called me Mark, back when anyone called me anything at all. For 6 years, I lived in the gutter levels of Cathara Station, a massive trading hub floating in orbit around a dying star at the edge of nowhere. Thousands of alien species passed through that station every day, buying and selling things I could not afford to look at. Humans were a minor species out there, tolerated, sometimes pitied, mostly ignored. We were considered soft and short-lived by the older races, the ones who had been traveling between stars while we were still figuring out fire. I had been a combat engineer in the Terran colonial fleet once. Good at my job too. Then a structural collapse on a forward base crushed 3 vertebrae in my spine, and just like that, I was done. Discharged. No pension because of some clause buried in paperwork I never read. No family waiting back home because home did not exist anymore. I drifted from station to station, until I washed up on Cathara with nothing but a dented canteen, a thermal blanket, and whatever pride a man can carry when he sleeps inside an abandoned cargo pod. I survived by scavenging. Alien food vendors sometimes tossed their leftovers near the waste processing sector, and if you got there early enough, you could find something that would not poison a human stomach. It was not a life, it was just breathing. That is where I was the night everything changed. I was picking through a pile of discarded crates near the recycling chutes when I heard something. A sound so faint I almost missed it. A wet, rasping little cry, like a kitten choking on dust. It came from a sealed metal crate half buried under garbage. Most people would have walked past. Cathara's lower decks were full of strange noises. You learned not to investigate. But I have never been smart in that particular way. I knelt down and pried the lid open with my bare hands. The metal edges cut my fingers, and my blood dripped onto what was inside. 2 creatures, babies of some kind, each about the size of a large dog, curled around each other in the dark. They had scales, dull and flaking, folded wings pressed tight against their bodies, tiny claws, visible ribs. One was black with silver veins running through its scales, like cracks in old marble. The other was deep red with ridges of gold along its spine. They were barely breathing. I did not know what species they were. I did not care. I knew what dying looked like. I had seen it enough times during the war. These 2 were hours away from it. I gathered them up in my arms and carried them back to my cargo pod. They were so weak they could not even bite me, though I felt their jaws try. Instinct, I suppose. Fight even when you have nothing left. I understood that. I had half a ration bar I had been saving for 2 days. That was all the food I owned in the universe. I chewed it into paste because their jaws were too weak to manage solid food, and I fed it to them from my fingers. I dripped water into their mouths from my canteen, drop by careful drop. I tore my only thermal blanket in half and wrapped 1 piece around each of them because their bodies were cold and trembling. I went hungry that night. It was not the first time, and I figured it would not be the last. But I knew what starving felt like, and I was not going to let it happen to anything that breathed if I could stop it. By morning, the black one had crawled onto my chest and fallen asleep there, his small claws gripping my shirt. The red one had wrapped herself around my wrist and would not let go. I named them on the spot, the way you do when something fragile trusts you. I called the black one Kale and the red one Seer. Over the following weeks, I gave them everything I had, which was almost nothing. I begged extra scraps from food vendors, who usually shooed me away. I traded my only pair of boots for a protein cartridge that could synthesize basic nutrition. I walked barefoot on cold metal floors, so 2 creatures I had found in the garbage could eat. I stole heating coils from a broken conduit and rigged them inside the cargo pod, because I noticed that Kale and Seer needed warmth to digest their food. Without heat, they just lay there shivering, and the food did nothing. Slowly, they grew stronger. Their scales began to shine, their eyes brightened, and their personalities emerged like flowers pushing through concrete. Kale was quiet and watchful. He learned to follow my voice commands within days. He would sit at my feet while I scavenged, his silver-veined eyes tracking everything around us. Doors, locks, people. He was always thinking, always studying. I sometimes caught him staring at me with an expression I could only describe as consideration, like he was trying to understand what I was. Seer was the opposite. She was fierce, emotional, and affectionate in equal measure. She growled at any stranger who came near. She accidentally singed my eyebrows once when her fire came in for the first time, just little sparks popping from her throat. But she was so upset about it that she pressed her snout against my face for an hour afterward. Every night, she curled around my neck to sleep, her breath warm against my ear. They were growing fast, and that brought trouble. One night, a station thug figured out what I had. He came to my cargo pod with a knife and a plan to steal them and sell them on the black market. I was 52 years old, malnourished, and my spine felt like it was held together with rust and bad luck. But when he reached for Seer, something inside me snapped into place. The same thing that used to click during combat. I picked up a metal pipe and I fought him. He cut me across the ribs. I broke his arm. He ran. I sat down on the floor of my cargo pod, bleeding through my shirt, and stitched the wound closed with salvaged wire, while Kale and Seer pressed against me, making sounds I had never heard before. High, keening cries. Not fear, distress. They were worried about me. That was the night they stopped seeing me as just a source of food. That was the night I became something else to them. I did not have a word for it then. I do now. I became their father. 3 months after I found them, everything changed again. They were growing fast. Kale was the size of a horse. Seer's wings brushed both walls of the cargo pod when she stretched them. Their scales had turned brilliant, almost glowing with a faint inner light. They could not hide anymore. A Draconari scout ship arrived at Cathara Station. I had heard of the Draconari, of course. Everyone had. Dragon-like beings who ruled over 400 star systems. Ancient, powerful, and terrifying. Their empire was built on something called dead honor, a sacred code that said any debt of life must be repaid sevenfold. No one crossed them and lived to discuss it. The scout was a warrior named Vorath. 15 feet tall, armored in living metal, with eyes like molten copper. He tracked some kind of biological signal to my cargo pod and tore the door open like it was paper. What he found made him stop cold. A half-starved, scarred human sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading aloud from a cracked datapad. An old Terran children's story about a lost dog finding its way home. One dragon baby draped across my lap, the other resting her head on my shoulder. I looked up at this massive creature filling my doorway, and I said the only thing that mattered. If you are here to take them, you will have to kill me first. I know that is easy for you, but they have eaten today. They are safe, and they are not going back in any crate. Vorath did not attack. He knelt. Right there in the doorway, this giant warrior knelt before a homeless man in a cargo pod. He activated his communicator and spoke words I did not understand at the time. The heirs live. A human holds them. He has bled for them. Within hours, Draconari warships filled the space around Cathara Station. Dozens of them, decloaking out of nothing, each one large enough to swallow the station whole. The entire place went into panic. People thought it was an invasion. It was not. It was a rescue. But the rescue nearly went wrong. A delegation of Draconari elders came aboard, led by matriarch Sathari. She was the regent, the one running the empire while the true ruler was away. She demanded the babies be returned immediately. Protocol, she said. The human was irrelevant. Then Kale stepped in front of me and roared. Not the squeaky sound he used to make. A real roar, deep and enormous, shaking the deck plates under our feet. Seer wrapped herself around my body, wings flared wide, fire flickering in her throat. They refused to leave me. The matriarch was stunned. She told me later that in 10,000 years of Draconari history, wormlings had never bonded with an outsider. Never. She asked me what I had done to them. I fed them when they were hungry, I said. I kept them warm when they were cold. I fought for them when someone tried to hurt them. That is all. She stared at me for a long time. Then her voice changed, grew softer, and she said, "That is not all, human. You will come with us." They brought me to Draconis Prime, their homeworld, a planet of volcanic glass and crystal mountains, and cities, carved into living stone. I was the first human to ever set foot there. Everything was built for beings the size of buildings. The stairs were 3 feet tall. I pulled a muscle on my first day just getting to breakfast, but they healed my spine with medical technology that made our best doctors look like children playing with bandages. They gave me a home, real food, a title no one had ever held before. Ash Keeper, they called me, the one who kept the flame alive when it should have died. Years passed. I watched Kale and Seer grow, not just in size but in spirit. Kale became a philosopher and strategist, cold and brilliant, but with a core of compassion that surprised everyone who met him. He quoted me in council meetings. He once told a room full of generals that true strength is feeding someone who cannot feed you back. He changed laws, he protected the weak. He built something new inside an empire that had always worshipped power above all else. Seer became a warrior and protector, fierce and beloved. She flew into battle when the borders were threatened, and she burned enemies to ash without hesitation. But after every fight, she landed in the places where survivors gathered, and she sheltered them under her wings. She learned that from me. From a torn blanket in a cargo pod, the day they were crowned as twin sovereigns, the first dual rulers in Draconari history, I stood in a chamber larger than most cities. The ceremony was broadcast across 400 star systems. Billions watched. At the moment of crowning, tradition demanded they name their first debt, the being to whom they owed their existence. Both of them spoke the same name, Marcus Bellamy, human, Ash Keeper. Kale addressed the entire empire with words that still echo across the galaxy. This man had nothing, no home, no name, no power. When he found us dying, he gave us everything he had. He went hungry so we could eat. He bled so we could live. No Draconari came for us, no elder, no warrior. A human did. Remember that, Seer added, her voice rolling like thunder across mountains. Any empire that forgets kindness deserves to fall. We will not forget, and we will never forget him. That day, the Draconari Imperium declared humanity under eternal aegis. Permanent, irrevocable protection. No species in the galaxy may harm, threaten, or exploit any human without answering to the full strength of 400 star systems and 2 dragon monarchs who still call a homeless man their father. Because I shared my last meal, people ask me all the time what my secret is, how I tamed dragons, how I changed galactic politics. I did not do any of that. I saw 2 hungry kids, and I fed them. That is not extraordinary. That is just being decent. The fact that the galaxy thinks it is remarkable says more about the galaxy than it says about me. I am sitting on a terrace right now, looking out over the crystal mountains of Draconis Prime. The sky is the color of molten amber. Kale, now a dragon the size of a warship, lowers his massive head and rests it beside my chair, exactly the way he did when he was a starving baby in a cargo pod. Seer lands beside us, shaking the entire mountain, and curls her tail gently around both of us. I put my hand on Kale's snout, the way I always have, and I say what I always say. Yeah, I love you too, kid. They say humanity is small, brief, fragile. Maybe so. But I have learned something the galaxy has not figured out yet. It is not the biggest fire that matters. It is the one that stays lit when everything else goes dark. And humans? We stay lit.